There was a time when politics and science used to stay in their respective corners. But these days, the partisans and the scientists are in the ring mixing it up. And some respected government agencies are walking away with black eyes.
Booster ignition and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Discovery.
If there's one federal agency we can all be proud of, surely it is NASA.
The Space Shuttle begins her journey back into orbit.
It's the agency that brings us the stars, takes us to other planets, studies our own, and of course, gave us the moon. That's the agency Gretchen Cook Anderson thought she was joining, a place literally and figuratively way above petty politics.
My job was supposed to be to get the news out.
But she also soon felt like an astronaut in a spinning centrifuge, under intense pressure and kind of queasy.
It was a heavy weight that I felt was just coming further and further down on my head.
Gretchen was unwittingly caught in a political orbit at NASA headquarters. You see, her beat was all about melting glaciers and rising sea level here on Earth. She was the PR person handling global warming, a real hot potato.
There's a lot of pressure for us to do what our boss wanted, and in that sense, boss meaning President Bush.
In her first week on the job, a movie called The Day After Tomorrow hit theaters nationwide. It's a dire story of climate change running amok, causing a sudden apocalypse. Reporters started calling her, asking for a reality check from NASA's experts. Gretchen's bosses, Bush administration political appointees, told her to block scientists from talking, or if a reporter had already called a scientist directly,
I was to sit in on those interviews and to provide some bit of coaching prior to the interview.
Sit in on the interviews and coach, so you become kind of like a minder.
I guess you could call it that, yeah.
Her bosses? Assistant Administrator for Public Affairs Glenn Mahone. He came to NASA during the Clinton years, but switched allegiance when Bush came into office. And his deputy, Dina Costa, a former local TV reporter dispatched to NASA from the White House. Gretchen says they started to heavily edit her press releases on climate change.
They were changes that either softened the news, altered the news altogether, or there were also times when instead of receiving that hard copy back, I was just essentially told we just don't think this is news, and it shouldn't happen.
Mahone and Acosta declined on-camera interviews, but Mahone talked to me on the phone. He said coaching scientists or other NASA staffers for interviews was a common practice, but he vehemently denies ever doctoring a press release. Gretchen did as she was told until it came to this man. That's NASA's climate change superstar, Jim Hansen. Hansen was the first scientist to tell Congress about global warming 20 years ago before a committee chaired by a certain senator from Tennessee. Later, Hansen provided much of the scientific heft behind Al Gore's slideshow turned movie, An Inconvenient Truth. In 2004, Hansen gave a speech warning that glaciers are melting faster than scientists first thought, and that Earth is nearing a climate tipping point. Definitely not the White House party line. Gretchen says her boss, Glenn Mahone, was enraged.
He wanted me to call Jim Hansen and tell him to cease and desist.
You?
Me.
Pick up the phone, call Jim Hansen.
Yes.
Perhaps, certainly in the top tier of leading climatologists, experts on this field, tell him to be quiet.
Correct.
And how did you feel about that request?
I felt like a deer in headlights.
Gretchen refused and says she soon found herself in a career Siberia. Mahone again denies he ever told Gretchen Cook Anderson to muzzle Hansen or had anything to do with her being marginalized. While I was there, he said, it may very well have happened, but it certainly didn't happen under my direction or with my knowledge. Gretchen Cook Anderson's direct boss, Dina Costa, told me he believes the integrity of science and technical information should never be compromised, and he says he's devoted his entire career to clear, concise, open, and transparent communications. Gretchen's story is the tip of a melting iceberg. Scientists from several federal agencies have complained the Bush administration is muzzling them when their findings seem to undermine White House policy on global warming.
I think the reason for that is everything has become political. Everything, and both parties are doing this. They're looking at everything through the political lens.
Christy Todd Whitman was Bush's first Environmental Protection Agency administrator. She expected to tackle the global warming issue, but was blocked, and she lays blame on Dick Cheney's doorstep.
The Vice President certainly has had a big role to play in this, and he has been very concerned about energy issues, and he's been very concerned about the health of the energy companies.
So the interests of the oil and gas industry just trumped all.
Well, had a big influence on it.
Vice President Cheney's office declined our request for a response to Christy Todd Whitman's allegation. Once Jim Hansen went public with his plight, the publicity forced the NASA administrator to remove the muzzles.
When I was made aware that Jim had an impression, or other scientists had an impression, that they were being denied access to the media, I fixed it immediately.
Jim Hansen and his NASA colleagues may be free to talk now, but what about all the other scientists in other agencies?
The assumption in a democracy is that the public is informed, and they're honestly informed. I think our founding fathers, if they saw what is happening now, they would have tears in their eyes, because this just does not make sense.